How's it going, everyone? This is the George here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Gladiator 2. That's right, 24 years after Ridley Scott's masterpiece movie that won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. We finally get Gladiator 2, once again directed by Ridley Scott and stars Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Connie Nelson, Denzel Washington, Joseph Quinn, and Fred Hettinger. Sorry if I mispronounced that last name. And this movie takes place 16 years after the events of the first Gladiator, after the deaths of Maximus and Commodus. The dream of Marcus Aurelius have yet to be lived. We got these two crazy emperor brothers. There's ruling, and Lucius is thrown into the gladiator arena with a bunch of rage and wanting to avenge the death of his wife. Feels similar to the first Gladiator movie. Well, that's definitely the plot of this movie. It definitely feels similar to the first movie. It is a movie that has a revenge story of trying to overthrow the corrupt empire. Now, when it comes to Gladiator, it's one of my all-time favorite movies. It's not just my favorite Ridley Scott movie. I know some people will prefer Blade Runner and Alien, but to me, it's Gladiator. It's probably the Ridley Scott movie that I've rewatched the most times since I was a teenager. I haven't watched it in a history through media class, and I fell in love with that movie right away. And just the production, like it was probably one of the first movies that I really appreciated how it looked, the cinematography, the costume designs, the settings, the plot, the character moments, not just the action, but the political stuff that's happening in Rome. It was one of those first movies I really paid attention to. And so when a sequel was announced to this movie, I think it's been on really Scott's mind for a while, but I remember it was gaining more traction a few years ago. I think before COVID, maybe around the time COVID broke out. And I was thinking to myself, I'm curious, but is a sequel necessary? Because Gladiator ended on a perfect note. And yeah, I got to review Gladiator one day on this channel. I was going to, but I lost track of time. But anyways, was a sequel of Gladiator necessary? I think we always ask that question with certain movies. Are certain sequels necessary for movies? I mean, we just got through with Joker 2 being the most pointless sequel ever. But sometimes if a movie's unnecessary, it doesn't mean it's bad. There's been movies that you're like, why was that made? But it's still pretty good or it's okay. With Gladiator 2, it feels like a movie that isn't needed, but at the same time, it was well made, well performed. And while the plot is similar to the first Gladiator movie, it still has a decent enough plot. And the thing is, when it comes to sequels, we judge sequels based on, is it way better than the first movie, and if not, oh, does that mean it's terrible? We never really have those sequels that are just, oh, it's pretty good. It's a very solid movie, not as good as the first one, but still a pretty good continuation. Movies like Beetlejuice that had come out, where it was like, oh, it's a pretty good sequel, but it's not the great sequel. That's how I feel about Gladiator 2. It's a very good movie that I enjoyed a lot more than I was expecting, but it's nowhere near as good as the first movie. Now, in regards to Gladiator 2, I was concerned at the beginning of this movie. The first 10 minutes or so of the movie, I felt like they were rushing stuff. It began pretty rocky, and I wasn't digging the score. And I get it, obviously, no one's going to top Hans Zimmer's score from the first movie. It was phenomenal. But I was growing concerned with the movie. But I felt like as the movie progressed, it found that same pacing that the first movie did. It was starting to take its time with its storytelling more, and the movie got better for me, which is the opposite of another sequel that came out over a month ago, where it started off promising, but every time it made a decision, it got worse and worse. With Gladiator 2, for the most part, I think the movie after the beginning went a lot more smoother. Now, yeah, you have those similar plot points to the first Gladiator where you're questioning the originality of it, but it still finds its way to have its own unique twist and plot points in the movie compared to the previous movie. Although the previous movie still did it a lot better. I definitely love the action sequences in this movie. Ridley Scott does such a great job with the fight choreography. I enjoyed the naval battle stuff with the water, and I know people are going to complain that, oh, sharks in the arena, that was historical inaccuracy. I don't go into these historical epics for the historical accuracy, even though that's helpful to have. I just come in to be entertained, and I was entertained with that stuff. The action definitely didn't disappoint. The cinematography still looks great. How Rome looks is incredible. The costume designs. It's as if, like, as far as like making the movie goes, Ridley Scott didn't lose his touch. And Ridley Scott, I think he's 87 years old now. He's in his late 80s. And the fact that he can make a movie of this big of a scope still is pretty fantastic and remarkable. And it's a reminder that historical epics don't come as often as they used to, and we still only have a couple directors who are still making them. And you just wonder, when is Ridley Scott's last movie going to be as he continues to age? But I definitely enjoyed the look of this movie and the action. As far as the performances go in this movie, to me, easily the best performances in this movie for me was Pedro Pascal and Denzel Washington. Pedro Pascal plays this general that Lucius holds a grudge against and wants to fight. And you think at first, oh, this character is going to be the typical bad guy. But then you learn more about the character. And you're like, oh, he's not really a bad guy. You really see where his allegiance is to. And you feel conflicted because, eventually Lucius is going to probably face off against this guy. What's going to happen when that confrontation happens? But I enjoy Pedro Pascal's performance. The best performance was Denzel Washington. And the thing I loved about Denzel Washington is he's like this manipulator in this movie. It felt like he was going back to his training day roots at times. He's one of my favorite actors. I loved him in movies such as Remember the Titans, Malcolm X, Training Day. This movie, he didn't disappoint. He's like very manipulative. He's like, talking to this side, then he's talking to the other side. He's playing with people. Really enjoyed his performance. Did such a great job. Joseph Quinn and Fred Hettinger play the two Emperor brothers who were more comedic at best. I wouldn't say they're like Beavis and Butthead, but they're definitely the more idiotic and over the top than Joaquin Phoenix's Commodus was in the previous movie. We, are entertaining, but sometimes a bit over the top. Paul Mescal as Lucius in this movie. I know a lot of people are comparing him to Russell Crowe from the previous movie as Maximus, and yeah, it's no contest. Russell Crowe as Maximus was way better. Not to be disrespectful to Paul Mescal, because his performance starts off wooden, but his performance improves throughout the movie. He does get better throughout the movie. He does as good of a job as he can, but it's no contest. Russell Crowe's Maximus way better. We learn much more about Lucius, which is interesting because they do something with his character, his background, and they almost tease you with doing something different from him. And at first I was like, oh great, they're gonna do that thing that movies like The Last Jedi like to do. But no, they don't do that. Instead they do something else. And even then when they make that decision, while it's better than the one they were hinting at, you're still conflicted because wait a minute, how is this possible? But for me personally, I didn't mind the decision as the movie progressed. It actually started making more sense. I know not everyone's going to be on board with that decision, though. Connie Nielsen returns as Lucilla, which is his mom, and she's still very good in this movie as always. There's another character from the previous movie that returns as well. That one senator, who's an ally, like to Maximus, and his mom, not Maximus. Well, he was an ally to Maximus, but he's also an ally to Lucius's mom. He looks like he hasn't aged at all, that guy, even though he's in his 80s. But overall, with the performances, while I would say they're not as memorable as the first movie, they're still pretty good. Although it's Denzel and Pedro Pascal that to me are the best performances in the movie. As I stated before, beginning pretty rocky. The second and third acts went a lot more smoother. Third act, it felt like they were starting to rush stuff, but they were able to cover what they needed to. And I know a lot of people are gonna have their complaints with this movie, such as the wishes of Maximus and Marcus Aurelius weren't honored, but honestly, that didn't annoy me in the movie. I actually thought that made sense because if you look at history, despite the sacrifices people make, whether it's fictional history or real life history, are their wishes really honored? It would make sense that someone more corrupt would eventually come in and still ruin stuff. That's why I never really mind that The Force Awakens something else happened after the events of Return of the Jedi, because you would think in that time span something more evil is going to come around. That actually makes sense to me in my opinion. I have no complaints about that whatsoever. Um, the score, as I said before, the score started off rocky, got better. When they kind of tapped into Hans Zimmer's old score, that's when the score was top notch. I really enjoyed how the score looked. But yeah, this is a movie that, do I think it was necessary? Probably not. You probably could have told any ancient Rome story with not being tied to Gladiator, but it's very interesting to see where some characters are many years later, to see if Rome shaped up to be the way Marcus Aurelius and Maximus wanted it to be, to see how Lucius grows up and all that. It's more in line with Beetlejuice, as I said before, where it's a very good sequel. It has its entertaining moments. There's some dumb but entertaining moments in this movie, but oddly enough, the so dumb they're entertaining moments actually blend in with the serious stuff a lot better. It actually, they blend in pretty well. This movie has its serious moments. It has its entertaining moments, but the story's not going to be as remarkable as the first movie. The first movie is still way better, but honestly, I went into this movie not expecting it to be as good as the first movie. In fact, as I left the movie, I thought this movie turned out way better than I was expecting it to be, and made me actually appreciate historical epic movies, the sword and sandal movie genre, the epic genre, whatever you want to call it. It's got so many different names. But overall, with Gladiator 2, yeah, first movie still way better, but I felt like this movie didn't ruin the first movie for me. I think it was a nice add on that is probably the best unnecessary movie ever made. It's well made, it's well acted, has a good story, not a great story, has its own twists that do make it different from the previous movie. Cinematography still top notch. Setting and costumes are still top notch. I heard Ridley Scott wants to make a third Gladiator movie. I don't think a third movie is necessary. I think if it ends here, it ends on a high note. And for many people that are not going to consider this movie, they'll say, oh, the first Gladiator movie ended perfectly, which is still true. But this one, I think, ended fairly well as well. So, was I entertained? The answer is yes. I was very entertained. I was a lot more entertained than I was expecting it to be. Overall, with Gladiator 2, this is a well made movie with a good enough plot, not a great plot, good enough plot, with some great acting, not perfect acting like the previous movie. But yeah, first movie still way better. But I still recommend you check this one out. It's still a well made movie. And if you're a fan of Denzel Washington performances, I recommend this movie. It looked like he had a lot of fun with this movie. And I think of all the actors in this movie, he should be the one that should be in consideration for award season, personally. But yes, as I said, this movie gets a thumbs up. And I'm gonna give Gladiator 2 a B plus. I wanted to give it an A minus, but I was thinking of some stuff and I was like, yeah, that they could have molded that better like in certain places. I don't want to give away spoilers. You gotta go see the movie yourself. I do recommend it. You see it in theaters. It is worth seeing on the big screen at the very least. But yes, Gladiator 2. Have you seen it? What you think about it? And what movies do you think were unnecessary but were still pretty good? And let me know in the comments down below on that one. I think Gladiator 2 is that movie that was unnecessary but was still fairly good. Let me know in the comments down below. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share this with someone that likes the Gladiator movies. And I hope to see you guys real soon. I do want to review Gladiator on this channel either next weekend. I'm seeing Wicked this weekend, so I'll also be reviewing Wicked. If not, I'll review Gladiator the following weekend so I can go more in depth on that movie and why I think that movie is perfect. And I hope to see you guys real soon. Take care, everyone.